So let's get started. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Bryce Merriman. I'm a landscape architect helping with the city of Bellingham to re-envision Civic and develop a plan for it. So you're probably wondering, why now? Why are we talking about Civic in this concerted way right now? And there's three big reasons. The first one is that the Civic Athletic Complex Master Plan has not been updated since 1980s, which means it's got more than 40 years on it. And as you can imagine, a lot has changed in that time, both in people's recreation expectations and the age and quality of the facilities that are there now. The second big reason is that we have an interesting opportunity in front of us, and that is the fact that the Bellingham School District's Carl Koser Elementary is nearing the end of its life. And one of the things that we know is that there's been a long-standing interest from the Puget neighborhood to have a community center potentially land on the corner where Carl Koser is now. And so this is an inflection point in the history of both the site as a park and the history of the site as an educational amenity. And so we're really hoping to harness that and make it a win-win for everyone in the community. And the third reason is that the park maybe also could better serve its surrounding neighbors, the people who live right adjacent to this. Many of us know it as a place where we drive to and we take our kids for recreation, whether that's aquatics, whether that's using the ice rinks, but it's also a place that is the neighborhood park for the people who live just adjacent to it. And how can we make that serve the people who use it even better through more access, more amenities, that sort of thing? So we've been working on this project for a little over 2 years now, starting with just trying to understand what's out there. What is all the information that we have learned from the last couple of years? Now we're into phase 2, and we're really exploring what the potential futures of this site might be. And that's been a several month-long process involving a lot of different conversations with a lot of different constituencies to make sure that we understand what your needs are and what your desires are for what this place might look like in the future. And then we'll move into the implementation phase. So a little bit about the site. One, you all probably know this because it's part of your everyday life, but I just wanted to reflect it back to you that this place is amazing because it's close to everything. It's close with walking, it's close with biking, it's close with whether you're driving, to so many of these amazing amenities, whether it's natural resources, these amazing forests that braid their way through the community, Lake Whatcom, Bellingham Bay, Whatcom Creek, it's all within close distance. And if you're thinking about as a regional amenity, it's also close to amazing regional facilities. Whether you're talking about the ferry terminal or the Amtrak terminal, whether you're talking about the airport, the easy access to I-5, this is a place that is central and easily accessible to so many people in this region. The other thing that we learned during the phase 1 is that this is a place that is incredibly, incredibly well used and well loved. In fact, it is the most visited park in the system with over 72,000 visitors per month, which is almost twice Lake Padden and Boulevard Park combined. And despite that, or maybe even because of that popularity, it also means it's not meeting the community's needs in various ways, in various vectors. And we're really excited to have this conversation about how we can better meet the community's needs. I think one of the things as we dove into what's going on at the site now is we also learned a lot about the natural conditions. So this is a site that is dominated kind of at the south end by a lot of recreational facilities and the parking lot, but the north end actually has quite a bit of ecological performance in it, with a series of streams, some really big mature trees and tree groves, as well as some wetlands, which you can see on the map here. And we invite you, those of you who are in the room, to go explore some of these maps. We have a whole series of findings from that first phase of work. In the summary of the phase of work, just to show the top lines, is that every facility, including the parking lots, is incredibly well used and occasionally maximize their capacity. We've heard people say, well, that place is never used, or that place is empty, and then immediately someone else across the room will say, no, I use that space all the time. That is my home at Civic. We use it for soccer, or we use it for baseball, or we use it for a ski swap, whatever it is. Everyone feels a piece of ownership of something at Civic. We also know that the funding of some of the past improvements limits what we can change on certain parcels of land. The ones I'm specifically thinking of is Jerry 4 here, Civic Stadium, and Joe Martin Field. Some of the ways that those have been funded would be quite difficult to unravel. Various indoor and outdoor facilities are older and require some level of rehabilitory maintenance for them to continue to function. The athletic facilities are generally very, very well used with growing constituencies. And there's an opportunity to define and achieve long-standing community goals here, and also an opportunity to improve the experience and positioning of Civic, both in Bellingham and the region. So I mentioned earlier that Bellingham School District is interested in having this conversation about the Carl Kosher site. And one of the things that provokes for us in thinking about how this facility might land in Civic or on a piece of Civic's property is what those parameters are for the school itself. So traditionally, the school district is looking for about 5 acres of land. Traditionally, they've used about 8 acres of land. It's a building that would be for about 450 students, about 70,000 square feet with both outdoor play and garden area. Security, it has to have a fenced perimeter to keep kids secure. There's also circulation for both bus and non-bus traffic. And the school district does a great job of integrating sustainable design elements. And this would be a swing school. So what that means is once a new school gets built, this school would be used for about 2 years while Bellingham School District builds another school, and then the Carl Kosher site would be potentially turned over. Mutual benefits here. We really see this as an opportunity to have a win-win for the entire community. Civic offers those co-benefits both to Bellingham Public School families to access these broader recreational amenities that the site offers. At the same time, the new school on the Civic's campus can offer to the community additional play spaces, indoor gymnasium spaces, community spaces, that sort of thing. And we really see this, this is the big driver of an inflection point in Civic's history. So the next thing I wanted to do is just at a very high level, I'm going to talk through the 4 options that we have presented for you this evening. These are presented, stage right, my left, on that side of the room, and invite you to really dig into them and explore them in more detail. The first one is this option of framing the park perimeter. And in this option, it pushes apart a couple of different uses. This sort of brown or orangish color here is always going to be coded as a school or community recreation center. These sort of light green spaces are new open spaces. Sometimes they're fields, sometimes they are less programmed spaces. And then this blue shape here is the aquatics center. So in this one, we're contemplating the school or community recreation center landing kind of where Puget and Fraser meet, so adjacent to some of these industrial uses to the north. There's a new or replaced recreation amenity that would be just to the west of it. And then this space that is currently, if you've used Jerry 3 recently, you know that sometimes it gets quite wet. We're saying, well, what if that land just wants to be wet? And we turn that into an interpretive wetland park over on that side of the site. I hear you chuckling, people. At the south end of the site, along Lakeway, the current Carl Kosher site becomes sort of a community anchor there with either that school or the community recreation center and potentially some expanded aquatics kind of spilling into that space. And then this becomes an open space where the current Downer fields are kind of wrapping around in an L there. Introducing a couple of new roundabouts here just to slow down traffic, but also straightening out some of the travel patterns going through the parking lot. And because we're doing the interpretive wetland park, introducing some green stormwater infrastructure through the park. And all this then gets connected through a pedestrian promenade moving up and down the site. And this does hold the potential for expansion at the Sportsplex site itself. So just a couple of precedents here. This facility with the 2 baseball diamonds and the the soccer football field might be something like what we have up here. That tuck under parking, which I didn't talk about, but you could have tuck under parking under the school or community center here, these wetland park examples for the C over here. And then we've heard from a lot of the indoor recreation users about some of the state-of-the-art facilities that are out there. This is an example from Provo, Utah, really kind of the premier destination for recreational spaces. And this is what some of those green stormwater infrastructure improvements might look like in the parking lot itself. The second option is really begins to think about, okay, well, what if the school or community center really began to land in the middle of the park site? And what would that mean for us? One of the things that we're concerned about with this particular option is that we don't cut it off the site between north and south. So how do we sneak pedestrians through this site, moving them back and forth, so that this might actually be a gateway between the north end of the site and the south end of the site? On the north end of the site, we're contemplating new or upgraded recreation facilities for all of the Jerry's there. Again, the center school or community recreation space with some adjacent structured parking if we need to go that direction for capacity. And then the Sportsplex is anchored here with a Woonerf that then turns into a pedestrian promenade all along the edge of Joe Martin Field, allowing people to still drop off, pick up, we heard about the heavy hockey bags for sure, and allow you to drop off and find a parking spot so that you're not having to haul that across alternation there. Carving away a little bit of space then, perhaps from the existing parking lot so that we can have some of those new recreation amenities that perhaps better serve the neighborhood. And then down along Lakeway, having a single bar, a single mass of a building that is either that school or community recreation center, and behind it, that expanded aquatics center and structured parking here on the corner of Lincoln. I think the big moves here, one is that connective path, the connected pedestrian corridor, including this closed pedestrian promenade portion here. Really emphasize sort of that walkability on the site. Some of these things might look like, where there's this great plaza opportunity here, welcoming people into either aquatics or that school or recreation center, or maybe it's more of a town square type of a facility. Again, this is another one of those great recreation opportunities that some of the constituents pointed us towards. This is at Eastern Washington University, a really great facility. And then in this space here, this new recreation amenities might look like a community playground, or it might look like picnic shelters, and that would be anchored along this pedestrian promenade. The third option, you can see we're like keeping on compressing and compressing. So the third option compresses it down so that most of the activity is happening south of Civic Stadium. And here, this is kind of an exciting one in that it thinks about changing the grades a little bit, changing the topography, and anchoring a school or community recreation center here, right across from the Civic Stadium, as well as here along Lakeway. And these get then connected by a single open space move that really anchors aquatics, anchors the school or community center in these two locations, Civic Stadium, Joe Martin Field, and the Sportsplex. So it becomes the there, if you will, of the site. And then those get connected through this Woonerf or shared space that turns the corner towards the Sportsplex. And a little bit of structured parking here in the corner with the improvements to Jerry Field up there. One of the things that we've heard is a real concern in all options that put any sort of development along Lakeway, that it feels like a place that feels a little inhospitable. Ooh, tough word. We just wanted to flag that there is a future buffered bike lane that's going to happen there, along with new street trees along that street. So it'll get a little bit better in the future. One of the things that this does contemplate, which you'll see here in a second, is the way that this preserves parking is about half of the existing parking field actually goes and tucks under this building. So half of this space is actually on structure, on a one-story parking structure, that the parking is tucking under it and the park is up above it. So you'll see that here in just a second. This is kind of what we're talking about, where there's a parking garage underneath here with then an open space, in this case an athletic field up on top of it. But that need not be an athletic field. It could be more of a social space that you have community events at over the summer, that sort of stuff. This all gets connected through this shared WUNRF space along this edge here. Tuck under community uses could potentially go along this edge where you have some meeting spaces, you have some community spaces with parking behind it, the pedestrian promenade, this lovely colonnade of trees marching down the way, and then the way that you could integrate art into some of the roundabouts. And then for our last option is, again, we're compressing down even further. And in some ways, this is the one that if you were really sort of constrained in your site planning, you might look at first, which is, could you anchor the community recreation center at the corner of Lakeway and Lincoln, and then where the Downer Fields are now, make that be the other spot for a school or community recreation center. This really does tighten up the footprint, and it puts a lot of uses together. It does preserve that future expansion opportunity for the Sportsplex, and that pedestrian promenade and WUNRF along there becomes that connective spine. And I think one of the benefits here is that this is a relatively straightforward permitting pathway. As you'll see, it also has the improvements to Jerry, it has the pedestrian promenade that's connecting them, and a smaller kind of carve out of some of these recreational amenities along with a plaza along here. What that might look like, the solar picnic shelters along here, or a community playground, or even a spray park, or pickleball as new amenities along here. This is an example of an elementary school on the left and a community recreation center on the right, existing in close proximity to each other and actually serving one another in terms of their constituencies, and a little bit of what that shared space WUNRF might look like. So that is a fire hose of information for you. And what I want to invite you to do is come up here after I'm done talking, ask me questions, ask the other team members questions. But what we're trying to get some feedback on is how well do these options align with the guidance that the Bellingham community gave the Parks Department through their PROS plan in 2020 and recently revised in 2023 on these 6 values of preservation, connection, play, equity, resiliency, and inclusivity. And then we thought that this was actually important in this particular case to add this third one, or the 7th one, excuse me, of value, thinking about the value that an option provides to the community. That means costs, that means permitting, that means impacts to the community as a whole, and potentially on promoting tourism. So we invite you to put dots on these on the boards. I see some out there already. That's one of the ways that we're going to know how these are resonating. The other way is through a survey. And you'll see these signs up throughout the room tonight. There's an online survey that you can take to give us your feedback, more open-ended questions, less sort of dot exercise questions that will help us really get a gauge of how the community is feeling. And with that, we look forward to your feedback. Like, seriously, thank you all for coming out tonight. This is an incredible, incredible turnout, and we would love to have more conversations with you now that I'm done presenting and I want to step out of this light. Thank you all, appreciate it.